The Final Broadcast. Chapter 1, Live on Air. The Manhattan skyline glimmered through the studio's tall glass panels as Jessica Fletcher adjusted the lapel of her tailored navy blazer. At her age, she hardly needed to chase new appearances or recognition, yet she had accepted the invitation from Morning America today with a sense of curiosity. The producers had wanted her commentary for a special cultural segment about literature's role in shaping civic life. Jessica had appeared on television countless times in her career as both an author and reluctant detective, but there was always a nervous flutter in her stomach before the red light of a live camera blinked on. Inside the studio, controlled chaos reigned. Camera operators wheeled heavy rigs across polished floors. Stagehands whispered into headsets, pointing toward the countdown clocks mounted high above. Screens displayed feeds from different sets, weather updates, stock market tickers, a correspondent preparing for an overseas report. Jessica was ushered to a modest guest chair near the main news desk, positioned just off to the side. Marissa Gray, the anchor whose face was as familiar to American households as their morning coffee, turned with a practiced smile. Her pearl earrings caught the studio lights as she extended her hand. "Jessica Fletcher, what an honor," she said warmly, her voice both rich and measured. "I've read your mysteries for years. You make my job look boring by comparison." Jessica chuckled. "I doubt anyone would call your job boring, Ms. Gray. Delivering the news to millions each morning requires poise I could never master." The two women exchanged pleasantries until a producer swooped in, holding a clipboard. 30 seconds, he barked, then vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Marissa took her seat behind the gleaming desk, where papers lay fanned in careful disorder. Alex Monroe, her co-anchor, adjusted his tie and gave a brief nod toward Jessica. He was younger, sharp-jawed, with a faint sheen of ambition written across his features. "Relax," Marissa whispered to Jessica, eyes on the teleprompter. "It's only live television." The red light blinked on. Music swelled from hidden speakers, followed by the rich timbre of Alex's voice. "Good morning, America. I'm Alex Monroe." "And I'm Marissa Gray," she followed seamlessly. "We begin this Tuesday morning with developing stories overseas." Jessica sat attentively, watching not just the broadcast but the mechanics behind it. Years of detective work had trained her to observe small details others overlooked, the tense way the teleprompter operator's foot tapped beneath his console, the slight delay as the floor manager relayed cues, the director's clipped voice echoing through headsets. It was a symphony of timing, every note crucial to avoid disaster. The first segment flowed smoothly. Correspondents appeared on split screens, graphics danced across the monitors, and Marissa transitioned effortlessly between grave updates and lighter introductions. Then came the cultural spot where Jessica would speak about her work. The camera panned toward her as Marissa read the introduction. Jessica smiled politely, answered questions about the role of storytelling in preserving truth, and exchanged a few witty remarks that drew chuckles from the crew. But as the segment wound down, Jessica noticed a shift. Marissa's posture stiffened ever so slightly, as though her concentration faltered. Her eyes flickered at the teleprompter with visible confusion. "The truth," Marissa's voice trembled, uncharacteristic for a broadcaster known for her composure. "The truth is buried, in blood." A puzzled silence fell across the set. Jessica's brow furrowed. That phrase, dark, grotesque, was not the sort of language morning television trafficked in. Marissa blinked rapidly, her hand lifting toward her throat. Her lips parted, but no further words came. Then, with shocking suddenness, she swayed forward. The elegant anchor collapsed onto the glossy news desk, scattering her script pages like startled doves. The thud of her fall echoed in the stunned stillness. For a heartbeat, the studio froze. Camera operators gaped, a stagehand dropped a clipboard, and Alex Monroe's face drained of color. Then chaos erupted. The director's shout, "Cut to commercial," boomed across the floor. Music surged as screens switched to a hastily rolled advertisement. Jessica was already on her feet, instincts overriding decorum. She reached Marissa's side, gently easing her head from the hard desk surface. Marissa's skin felt clammy, her breathing shallow. On the edge of the desk sat a porcelain mug, steam still curling from its rim. The lipstick mark on its side glistened under the lights. "Call an ambulance," Jessica ordered, her voice sharper than she realized. Crew members scrambled, phones were raised, and the paramedics stationed nearby for emergencies rushed in with a stretcher. Jessica, kneeling close, noticed a faint odor from the mug, sharp, chemical, bitter. Coffee should not smell like that. She glanced at the teleprompter, still frozen on the phrase, "The truth is buried in blood." The words glared back at her like a signature scrawled in crimson ink. Jessica's mind worked quickly, filing observations, the odd phrase in the script, the timing of the collapse, the suspicious smell in the mug. To most, it looked like exhaustion or illness. But Jessica Fletcher had lived through too many accidents that were, in truth, carefully staged murders. As paramedics lifted Marissa onto the stretcher, Alex Monroe attempted to resume his composure. "She's been under a lot of stress," he muttered, almost to himself. "Late nights, too much coffee." Jessica looked at him carefully. His voice trembled at the edges, betraying unease. Yet her instincts told her that stress alone could not explain the bitter tang she had smelled or the peculiar words inserted into the script. The crew dispersed in fragments, whispers rippling like wind through reeds. Some muttered about exhaustion, others speculated about heart conditions. Jessica remained silent, her mind turning over the pieces. The mug, the teleprompter, the phrase, the collapse, each was a note in a melody she had not yet identified, but she knew it played a darker tune than the others realized. As the stretcher wheeled Marissa away, Jessica caught a glimpse of the teleprompter operator, pale and nervous, slipping quietly out a side door. Another detail, another thread. The show would recover, the network would spin, but Jessica Fletcher knew she had just witnessed the beginning of something far more sinister. Somewhere in the labyrinth of this newsroom, a deliberate hand had set this moment into motion. And she would uncover it. Chapter 2, The Whisper in the Script. The studio had fallen into a strained quiet after Marissa Gray's collapse. Though the cameras had cut to commercials, the weight of what had happened lingered like smoke after a fire. Jessica Fletcher sat in the green room, a space normally filled with the chatter of guests sipping coffee and reviewing their notes. Now it felt like a holding pen for uncertainty. A junior producer had guided her there, muttering vague assurances that the show would resume soon and that the network appreciated her patience. The young man's hands trembled as he set down a tray of bottled water before dashing off again, leaving Jessica alone with her thoughts. Jessica was not a woman who waited idly. She smoothed the skirt of her suit and scanned the room with the same attentiveness she brought to a crime scene. On a side table lay a stack of papers, clearly left in haste. At first glance they appeared to be the rehearsal scripts for the day's broadcast, pages of neatly formatted text with highlighted cues and transitions. She picked one up and studied it carefully. Marissa's introduction of Jessica had been scripted almost word for word in this draft. Jessica smiled faintly at the accuracy, recalling how smoothly Marissa had read it. But then her eyes moved toward the ending notes of the cultural segment, and her smile faded. The bizarre line that had chilled the room, "The truth is buried in blood," was nowhere on the page. Jessica tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the paper. She knew what she had heard. Those words had not been imagined. The shock on the crew's faces had been genuine, too. Which meant that someone had tampered with the teleprompter text between the printed rehearsal draft and the live broadcast. At that moment, the door opened and Alex Monroe, Marissa's co-anchor, stepped inside. His tie was loosened, his face drawn. Gone was the polished confidence he projected on camera. Now he looked like a man wrestling with fear and guilt. "Jessica," he greeted, voice low. "They said you were in here. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," she replied, folding the script page neatly and setting it down. "It's Marissa I'm worried about. Have you heard anything?" Alex shook his head. "She's at the hospital. The doctors haven't said much." His jaw tightened. "She's strong. She'll pull through." Jessica studied him with calm patience. "Tell me, Alex. Did you notice the teleprompter?" His brow furrowed. "What about it?" "The final line Marissa read wasn't in the script," Jessica explained. "It wasn't even coherent with the rest of the broadcast. Someone inserted it." Alex's lips parted, then closed again. He ran a hand across his forehead. "I thought I misheard. But you're right." That phrase, he trailed off, unease flickering across his expression. Jessica leaned forward slightly. "Who has access to alter the teleprompter script?" "Technically," Alex said, his voice gaining a brittle edge. "Producers, writers, and the teleprompter operator. But anyone with clearance can find a way if they want to." He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Marissa was meticulous. She checked her copy every morning. If something slipped through," he paused, then lowered his voice. "It wasn't by accident." Jessica's mind sharpened at his choice of words. "Not by accident." That implied intent. "Do you know who prepared today's script?" she asked. "It should have been Dana Collins," Alex answered after a moment. "She's a junior writer. Fresh out of Columbia. Bright kid, always nervous about getting things perfect." He sighed. "But even if Dana wrote a strange line, Marissa would have caught it in rehearsal." Jessica recalled Marissa's confident smile when they had spoken before the show. No trace of nerves, no sign of confusion, until that one dreadful moment. "Strange," Jessica murmured. "If the line wasn't in rehearsal, then it must have been added afterward." Before Alex could reply, the door cracked open again. A stagehand stuck his head in, eyes darting nervously. "They want you back in the studio soon," he said. "We're patching the broadcast together." He glanced at Jessica, hesitated as though unsure whether to include her in the message, then disappeared again. Alex muttered something under his breath and left the room, leaving Jessica once again with her thoughts. She returned to the script pages and examined them more closely. Margins filled with handwritten notes, timing adjustments, and highlighter streaks told their own story of preparation. But none of it explained the macabre phrase that had slid into the live text like a snake in the grass. Jessica rose and decided to take a quiet walk toward the control booth. She moved with deliberate calm, as though she belonged there, nodding politely at crew members still buzzing with anxious energy. The control booth was a hive of monitors, each glowing with feeds from cameras, graphics, and teleprompters. At the main console, the teleprompter operator, a young man named Owen, sat hunched, staring at his screen as if it might burst into flames. "Excuse me," Jessica said softly. Owen jumped, nearly knocking over his coffee. His eyes darted nervously toward her. "Oh, Mrs. Fletcher. I didn't know you'd be here." "I won't take much of your time," Jessica assured him. "I only wanted to ask, did you notice anything unusual in the script before it went live?" Owen swallowed hard. I mean, I just load what they give me. I don't write it. I didn't notice that line until Marissa read it." Jessica studied him. His jittery manner suggested fear, but whether it was fear of being blamed or fear of what he knew, she could not yet decide. "Did anyone else access your system this morning?" she pressed gently. His silence spoke louder than words. He averted his gaze, fingers fidgeting with a pen. Finally, he muttered, "Alex came by. Said he wanted to double-check the flow. But that's not unusual, he does that sometimes." Jessica's brows lifted slightly. "Did he touch the console?" I don't know. I mean, maybe." Owen looked miserable. "Please don't tell anyone I said that. I don't want to get fired." Jessica offered a reassuring smile. "You've been very helpful, Owen." "Thank you." As she walked away, her thoughts churned. Alex's visit to the teleprompter booth just before the broadcast could have been innocent. But combined with the strange line and Marissa's collapse, it painted a troubling picture. Back in the green room, Jessica sat once more and considered the larger pattern. Marissa collapses after sipping coffee. A bizarre phrase appears on the teleprompter at the very moment. One event poisoned the body, the other poisoned the broadcast. Coincidence? Jessica Fletcher did not believe in such things. If someone had orchestrated this, they had succeeded in distracting everyone at once. And if Dana Collins's name was tied to the script preparation, then perhaps she was being set up as the scapegoat. Jessica leaned back, eyes narrowing. Somewhere among the nervous producers, ambitious anchors, and anxious crew, a deliberate hand had scripted not just the morning news, but attempted murder. And Jessica intended to find out whose hand it was. Chapter 3, Poisoned Words, Poisoned Cup. Jessica Fletcher had seen illness, fainting, even stage fright on live television before, but what happened to Marissa Gray was different. The anchor had not simply lost her footing, she had collapsed with alarming speed, and the memory of her clammy skin and shallow breath weighed on Jessica's mind long after the ambulance pulled away. By late afternoon, the city's relentless energy had resumed. Outside the network building, New Yorkers streamed past, unaware that one of their most trusted morning voices was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Jessica, however, made her way to St. Luke's Hospital with purpose. Her reputation preceded her, and when she explained she had been present during Marissa's collapse, a sympathetic nurse allowed her into the intensive care ward. Marissa lay pale against the sheets, her elegant presence reduced to fragile stillness. Monitors beeped steadily, 4 lines ran into her arm, and oxygen hissed softly beside her. A doctor in a white coat entered moments later, and Jessica introduced herself. "I was with Ms. Gray this morning," Jessica said gently. "Can you tell me what caused her collapse?" The doctor hesitated but finally nodded. "Preliminary tests show she ingested a toxic alkaloid. Not common, but deadly if untreated. We've stabilized her, but the dose was strong." Jessica's brow furrowed. "Poison," she said quietly. The doctor confirmed it with a grave nod. "Yes. And it was likely delivered through something she consumed right before going on air." Jessica thanked him and left, her mind racing. The memory of the lipstick-stained coffee mug at the news desk replayed in sharp detail. She had smelled the bitterness, a sharp undertone that had nothing to do with roasted beans. It had to be the vector. That evening, Jessica returned to the studio. A security guard at first refused her entry, but a senior producer recognized her and reluctantly allowed her in. The set, once buzzing with energy, now felt like a crime scene disguised as a workplace. Cameras were covered, lights dimmed, and crew members whispered nervously in corners. Jessica approached the desk where Marissa had collapsed. The mug itself was gone, confiscated by the police, but Jessica noticed the saucer still sitting beneath the spot where it had rested. She leaned closer, her sharp eyes catching something faint under the glare of the studio lights, a dusting of powder clinging to the glossy porcelain. She touched it lightly with a tissue, chalky, bitter-smelling, unmistakable. Whoever had poisoned the coffee had been careless enough to leave residue. As she straightened, Jessica felt the weight of eyes on her. She turned to find Dana Collins, the young scriptwriter Alex had mentioned, hovering by the edge of the stage. Dana's wide, anxious eyes made her look younger than she was. "You shouldn't be in here," Dana whispered, her voice trembling. "The police said this area is off-limits." Jessica offered a warm but steady smile. "Neither should you, my dear. But perhaps you're as troubled by what happened as I am." Dana's lips trembled. "They think I did it." Jessica tilted her head. "And did you?" "Of course not." Dana blurted, tears rising in her eyes. I wrote the original script last night. I emailed it in. Marissa even approved it this morning. But then that line appeared on the teleprompter, and now everyone's looking at me like I'm guilty." Jessica guided her to sit. "Tell me exactly what you did today." Dana wrung her hands. "I came in early. Checked the drafts. Printed a copy for rehearsal. Then I went to the control booth to drop it off. After that, I was in the research office, pulling background for tomorrow's show. I never touched the teleprompter system again." Jessica studied her closely. Her panic seemed genuine, her words unpolished but sincere. If Dana was lying, she was an excellent actress. "Do you share your password with anyone?" Jessica asked gently. Dana hesitated. "I sometimes leave it on a sticky note near my workstation. It's silly, I know. But I didn't think." "Don't scold yourself now," Jessica interrupted softly. "If someone wanted to frame you, that would be the perfect way to do it." At that moment, Alex Monroe entered the set, his tie still loosened, his expression stormy. "Jessica," he said sharply. "You're meddling. Let the police handle this." "I'm not meddling, Mr. Monroe," Jessica replied, her voice even. "I'm observing. And what I've observed tells me this was no accident." Alex's jaw tightened. He looked from Jessica to Dana, then back again. "Be careful what you imply. Careers are on the line here." "Careers," Jessica repeated thoughtfully. "Or reputations?" Before Alex could answer, a stagehand rushed over, whispering something in his ear. Alex excused himself brusquely, leaving Jessica and Dana alone again. Jessica turned back to the young woman. "Dana, did Marissa ever confide in you? Anything that might explain why someone would want to silence her?" Dana hesitated, then nodded faintly. "She asked me to pull some financial records last week, contracts with certain advertisers. She said something didn't add up. But she told me to keep it quiet. I thought it was just part of an investigation she was working on." Jessica's mind sharpened. Marissa, the face of morning television, digging into financial impropriety? That was a dangerous pursuit, especially if powerful interests were at stake. Dana, one last question, Jessica asked. Do you recall who had access to your workstation today? The young woman swallowed hard. I left my desk for about 15 minutes to get coffee. When I came back, Alex was walking out of the writer's room. He said he was looking for research notes, but he didn't find them. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. Pieces of the puzzle were forming: a poisoned mug, a planted teleprompter phrase, a vulnerable junior writer set up to take the blame. The timing was too precise, the staging too theatrical. She glanced again at the teleprompter, still frozen on the haunting words, "The truth is buried in blood." Whoever had written that wanted it noticed. It wasn't just a distraction, it was a signature, a declaration. As Jessica left the studio that night, her footsteps echoing across the polished floors, she knew two things for certain. First, Marissa Gray had not simply collapsed from stress, she had been targeted. Second, the words on the teleprompter were not random. They were a message, and if Jessica could decipher who had written them, she would be one step closer to unmasking a killer. Chapter 4: Behind the Screens. The next morning, Jessica Fletcher arrived at the studio earlier than most of the crew. The network building stood like a glass monolith against the Manhattan skyline, its reflective windows catching the pale dawn. A news van idled out front, reporters already circling for scraps of information about Marissa Gray's condition. Jessica slipped inside quietly, her guest badge still clipped to her lapel from the day before. She made her way to the control wing, where rows of editing bays and computer consoles hummed with dormant energy. It was quieter here, the bustle of the main set reduced to faint echoes. She had learned long ago that the backstage spaces of any production, whether a theater, a newsroom, or a television studio, often hid more truth than the polished front. The IT department occupied a corner suite of glass-walled offices. A young technician named Marcus, his shirt wrinkled and tie askew, looked up from a bank of monitors as Jessica stepped in. He blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Fletcher? You're not officially supposed to be here." Jessica smiled disarmingly. "Oh, I'm quite aware, Marcus. But you must understand, I saw Marissa collapse. I know in my heart it wasn't natural. You of all people might have the answers. Please, help me." Marcus hesitated. He was young enough to be impressed by Jessica's reputation but wary enough to guard his position. Finally, he gestured toward a chair. "Just a few minutes, then. Before my supervisor comes in." Jessica sat, folding her hands patiently. "I'd like to see the log files for yesterday's teleprompter. Every change, every keystroke." Marcus pulled up a terminal window, scrolling through a long series of time-stamped entries. To Jessica's untrained eye, it was a jungle of code and commands. But Marcus narrated. "Here's the original load, 9:15 a.m., script imported from Dana Collins's workstation. That matches her draft. Rehearsal was done using that file." He scrolled further. "And here, 10:58 a.m., a manual entry. The phrase, 'The truth is buried in blood.' Inserted directly into the teleprompter feed." Jessica leaned closer. "Who entered it?" "The system logs every access," Marcus explained. He highlighted the entry. "See this? It's tied to Dana Collins's account. Her credentials." Jessica frowned. "But Dana swore she wasn't near the system at that time." Marcus shrugged. "That's what the log says. Unless, he trailed off. Unless what? Jessica pressed. Well, unless someone else used her credentials. Her password. Happens all the time, especially if she wasn't careful. But the system can't tell the difference. It just sees the account. Jessica's thoughts clicked rapidly. Dana had admitted leaving her password on a sticky note at her workstation. That made her the perfect scapegoat. Marcus, she said gently, does the system record the physical terminal used? Not just the account, but which workstation logged in. He hesitated, then smiled faintly, almost proud of his expertise. Actually, yes. Most people don't realize it, but we track MAC addresses. Let me check. He typed furiously, lines of data flashing across the screen. Finally, he pointed. There. The entry was made from a workstation in the producer's office. Jessica's pulse quickened. Not from Dana's desk. No, Marcus confirmed. From the producer's office. That's what the logs say. She thanked him sincerely. Marcus, nervous but clearly pleased to have been useful, promised to keep their conversation quiet. Jessica slipped back into the hallway, her mind racing. Whoever had tampered with the teleprompter hadn't just wanted to rattle Marissa. They had also taken pains to implicate Dana. It was a deliberate frame-up. Jessica followed the corridor to the producer's office, a glass-walled space lined with bulletin boards and whiteboards scribbled with story ideas. The door was ajar. She slipped inside, scanning quickly. The workstation sat idle, its screensaver flickering with a swirl of abstract blue and gray. Jessica recognized it instantly. She had glimpsed the same screensaver the previous day when she'd walked past the booth. It matched Marcus's data perfectly. On the desk lay a notebook. Jessica flipped it open carefully. Pages filled with schedules, scribbles, and random words spilled before her eyes. But one page made her pause. Scrawled in a hurried hand was a phrase, "Truth in Bloodlines." She traced the words with her finger. The similarity to the teleprompter phrase was unmistakable. It was as if the author had been playing with variations, drafting the sinister sentence before deciding which version to use. Tucked between the pages was a photograph. Jessica pulled it free and studied it. Marissa Gray, smiling in her anchor's chair, arm around an unidentified colleague. Across the top, in the same hurried handwriting, someone had written, "She knows." Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line. Whoever wrote this feared Marissa, or at least feared what she might reveal. The sound of footsteps in the corridor snapped her attention. She slipped the notebook back into place and stepped quietly out the opposite door before anyone could see her. Later that afternoon, Jessica found herself seated across from Dana Collins once more, this time in a small coffee shop near the studio. Dana's hands clutched a paper cup, knuckles white. "They suspended me," Dana whispered. "HR said until the police clear me, I can't come back." Jessica leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Dana, someone is trying very hard to frame you. I saw the logs myself." The phrase was inserted from the producer's office, not your desk. "And I found notes that tied directly to the message Marissa read." Dana's eyes widened with relief and fear all at once. "Then, you believe me?" "I do," Jessica said gently. "But belief isn't enough. We need proof strong enough to convince the police, and to unmask the real culprit." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. In her long career of solving crimes, Jessica had seen patterns emerge where others saw chaos. Here, the pattern was beginning to take shape. Someone with access and authority had manipulated both the teleprompter and Marissa's coffee. They had framed Dana to deflect suspicion. And the notebook suggested a deeper reason. Marissa had stumbled onto something someone desperately wanted buried. As Jessica left the cafe, her eyes narrowed against the glare of the city lights. The pieces were aligning, but the puzzle was far from complete. She knew one thing for certain: behind the screens of the network, behind the polished anchors and scripted broadcasts, someone had crafted a deadly performance. And Jessica intended to read between every line until the curtain fell on the truth. Chapter 5: Rivalries and Secrets. The newsroom buzzed the next morning like a shaken beehive. Producers barked into headsets, assistants dashed between desks with papers clutched to their chests, and television screens replayed edited clips from yesterday's broadcast, carefully omitting the shocking collapse. The network wanted to project stability, but Jessica Fletcher could feel the cracks widening beneath the polished surface. She moved through the chaos unnoticed, her small frame and calm demeanor allowing her to slip past without raising suspicion. She had always preferred it that way, let the louder voices draw attention while she quietly gathered the pieces. Jessica began her inquiries not in the control booth or producers' offices but among the people who knew Marissa best, the crew. She found Carol, the makeup artist, tidying brushes near the dressing rooms. The woman looked shaken, her usual cheer dimmed. "How is she?" Carol asked in a hushed tone as soon as she spotted Jessica. "Stable, but still unconscious," Jessica answered gently. "The doctors say she was poisoned." Carol's hand flew to her mouth. "Poisoned? My God. I thought it was her heart or nerves." "Who would? Why would anyone do that?" "That's what I intend to find out," Jessica said softly. "Tell me, Carol, how was Marissa's relationship with her colleagues?" Carol hesitated, eyes flickering down the corridor. "On camera? Perfect. Off camera?" She lowered her voice further. "There was tension. Especially with Alex. He's been eyeing her spot for years. Everyone knows it." Jessica's brow arched. "Tension in what way?" Carol dabbed at a brush. "Marissa got the bigger salary, the prime interviews, the awards. Alex resented it. They smiled for the cameras, but behind the scenes," she shook her head. "Ice." Jessica thanked her and moved on. She had seen enough rivalries in publishing, teaching, and politics to know ambition could be a powerful motive. Her next stop was the writer's bullpen, where the younger staff tapped furiously at keyboards, pretending not to whisper about the unfolding scandal. Jessica approached a tall man in shirt sleeves hunched over a desk stacked with research clippings. His name badge read Tom Halpern. "Excuse me, Mr. Halpern," Jessica said politely. "May I have a word?" He looked up, startled. "Mrs. Fletcher?" "Of course. You're practically a legend around here." Jessica smiled faintly. "Flattery aside, I'm trying to understand what happened to Marissa. Some say she had enemies. Do you know if she was working on anything controversial?" Tom glanced around, then leaned closer. "She was digging into something big. She asked me to pull background on our top advertisers, contracts, invoices, campaign records. She said there were discrepancies, maybe fraud. But she told me to keep quiet. Said not even Alex could know." Jessica's mind sharpened. That fit with what Dana had confided. Marissa hadn't collapsed by chance, she had been silenced before she could reveal too much. As Jessica left the bullpen, she nearly collided with Alex Monroe himself. He looked immaculate again today, his tie perfectly knotted, his hair shellacked into place. Only the tightness around his eyes betrayed the pressure he was under. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said with a forced smile. "Still playing detective?" "I prefer to think of it as seeking the truth," Jessica replied evenly. Alex's smile faltered. "Well, the truth is, this network is in crisis. We don't need rumors about poison or conspiracies. Marissa will recover, and when she does, we'll put this behind us." Jessica held his gaze. "You seem very certain of her recovery." He bristled. "She's strong. Stronger than most. And if she can't continue, well, someone has to keep the show alive. The public expects stability." Jessica let the words hang in the air. Ambition was rarely confessed outright, but in Alex's tone she heard the faint clang of opportunity. If Marissa were permanently incapacitated, he would slide neatly into her chair. She decided to press gently. "Tell me, Mr. Monroe, did you speak with Marissa yesterday morning before the broadcast?" He hesitated. "Briefly. We reviewed the segment transitions." "And did you visit the teleprompter booth?" His eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" Jessica smiled faintly. "I make it my business to observe." Alex's jaw tightened, but before he could reply, a producer shouted his name from across the floor. He excused himself brusquely, leaving Jessica with confirmation of his defensiveness. Later that afternoon, Jessica arranged to meet Detective Alvarez, the officer leading the official investigation. They sat across from one another in the station's interview room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. "You've been busy," Alvarez remarked, flipping through notes. "Talking to writers, makeup artists, anchors. Care to share your theory?" Jessica folded her hands. The poisoning was deliberate. The altered teleprompter text was no accident either. Both were designed to silence Marissa and frame Dana Collins as the culprit. Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "You think the kid's innocent?" "I do," Jessica said firmly. Her account was used, but the logs show the edit came from the producer's office, not her desk. Alvarez leaned back. "That's useful. We've been leaning on her hard. Maybe too hard." Jessica continued. Marissa had been investigating financial misconduct involving network advertisers. That gave someone motive to stop her. And Alex Monroe's rivalry with her gave him opportunity. He was seen in the teleprompter booth moments before the broadcast. Alvarez tapped his pen. "You're saying Monroe poisoned his co-anchor on live television?" "That's bold, even for ambition." "Bold," Jessica agreed. "But not impossible. He gains the spotlight, and the network avoids a scandal by pinning it on a junior writer. Two birds with one stone." Alvarez didn't commit, but Jessica could see her words planted seeds of doubt in his mind. That evening, Jessica returned to her hotel room and spread her notes across the desk. The picture was becoming clearer. Motive: Marissa uncovered something dangerous about advertising contracts. Means: a poisoned cup of coffee prepared before the broadcast. Opportunity: access to the teleprompter and the producer's office to frame Dana. But there were still gaps. Who exactly stood to lose from Marissa's investigation? And was Alex merely ambitious, or directly complicit? Jessica stared out the window at the glittering city below. The newsroom was a hive of egos and secrets, each person protecting their own career. Somewhere in that hive was a wasp willing to kill. And Jessica intended to smoke it out. Chapter 6: The Digital Trail. Jessica Fletcher had always believed that words left footprints, whether written in ink, whispered in confidence, or typed into a machine. If the bizarre phrase that scrolled across the teleprompter had been planted deliberately, then its footprints were buried somewhere in the newsroom's digital soil. All she needed was the patience to uncover them. She returned to the IT department the following day, once again finding Marcus hunched over his workstation. His desk bore the familiar clutter of energy drink cans, stacks of technical manuals, and sticky notes scrawled with half-decipherable passwords. The faint glow of multiple monitors lit his tired face. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said nervously. "I thought we agreed yesterday was just between us." "It is," Jessica assured him. "But I think you know as well as I do that the police are focusing on the wrong person. If we don't bring them the truth, an innocent young woman could lose her career, and a guilty party will walk free." Marcus rubbed his forehead, torn between self-preservation and the tug of conscience. At last, he sighed. "All right. What do you need?" "I need the digital trail," Jessica replied. "Show me how the teleprompter edit was made and from where." Marcus pulled up the system logs again, typing quickly. "Here's the entry, 10:58 a.m. inserted directly into the prompter text." It used Dana Collins's credentials, but, he clicked through another screen. The workstation ID doesn't match hers. The edit came from the producer's office. Jessica leaned closer. And who had access to that office? Marcus shrugged. Any senior producer, sometimes anchors pop in. But mostly it's reserved for final script checks. Jessica's eyes sharpened. Anchors like Alex Monroe? Marcus gave her a guarded look. "I didn't say that." "No, you didn't," Jessica said gently. "But the logs did." She jotted the details into her notebook, then stood. "Thank you, Marcus. You've been very helpful. If anyone asks, you simply explained how the system works. Nothing more." Leaving the IT office, Jessica walked briskly down the corridor toward the producer's suite. This time, she did not sneak but asked openly to be let in, flashing the polite yet firm smile she had honed in decades of small-town diplomacy. The receptionist, distracted with calls, waved her through without much fuss. The producer's office was spacious compared to the cramped writer's bullpen. A wide desk stood near the window, strewn with storyboards, sticky notes, and scribbled memos. A large computer monitor sat dark, its blue swirl screensaver flickering gently. Jessica recognized it from Marcus's data. This was the workstation used to plant the phrase. She moved carefully, scanning the room. On a bulletin board hung index cards listing upcoming guest segments, politicians, celebrities, corporate executives. Near the bottom corner, Jessica spotted a name she didn't recognize, attached to a major advertising sponsor. She tucked it into her memory for later. Her attention returned to the desk. A leather-bound notebook rested half-hidden beneath a stack of papers. Jessica opened it cautiously. Inside, hurried notes filled the pages, reminders, meeting times, fragments of sentences. Then her breath caught. Scrawled across one page in large letters was a near match to the altered script line, "Truth in Bloodlines." Variations trailed beneath it, as if the writer had been experimenting with wording before settling on the final phrase Marissa read aloud. Jessica turned the page and froze. Slipped between the sheets was a photograph of Marissa Gray herself, smiling during an off-air moment. Across the glossy surface, in the same hurried handwriting, someone had written, "She knows." Jessica felt a chill. This wasn't merely sabotage, it was a direct warning. Marissa had discovered something she wasn't meant to. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Jessica snap the notebook shut. She slipped it back into its place just as the office door opened. Alex Monroe stood in the doorway, his sharp features shadowed by suspicion. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said, voice smooth but strained. "What are you doing here?" Jessica turned calmly. "Observing. It's a habit I've never been able to shake." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You're wasting your time. This was a tragic accident, not the plot of one of your novels." Jessica's eyes met his without flinching. "Marissa was poisoned, Alex. And the teleprompter was altered. Accidents don't leave digital fingerprints." For a moment, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashed. Then he smoothed his features and forced a smile. "You're seeing shadows where there are none. Be careful, Jessica. This isn't Cabot Cove. People here don't take kindly to outsiders meddling." Jessica regarded him coolly. "People everywhere dislike meddling, Mr. Monroe. Especially those with something to hide." Before he could respond, a producer called his name from down the hall. He gave Jessica one last hard look and left. Jessica exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Confrontation was never her first choice, but Alex's defensiveness only deepened her suspicions. She now had three crucial pieces: the IT logs showing the edit from the producer's office, the notebook scribbles matching the sinister phrase, and Alex's unexplained presence in the teleprompter booth just before the broadcast. That evening, Jessica returned to her hotel, spreading her notes across the desk once again. She reviewed everything. Digital trail, Dana's account, but the workstation traced to the producer's office. Physical evidence, residue of poison on Marissa's saucer. Notebook clue, variations of the phrase and the photo of Marissa marked, "She knows." Suspicious behavior, Alex defensive, present where he had no reason to be. It was a web tightening around him. And yet, Jessica knew better than to leap to conclusions. Motives ran deeper in the world of television than simple rivalry. Money, contracts, reputations, all were at stake. She thought of Dana, suspended and terrified, her career hanging by a thread. The killer had chosen her as a scapegoat because she was young, inexperienced, and vulnerable. It was cruel, but also calculated. Someone who knew how narratives worked had constructed this frame as neatly as any broadcast script. Jessica leaned back, her pen tapping against her notebook. The phrase, "the truth is buried in blood," replayed in her mind. It wasn't random. It was symbolic, maybe even personal. A literary flourish meant to taunt or declare ownership. As the city's lights glittered outside her window, Jessica whispered to herself, "If I follow the trail of words, I'll find the trail of the killer." She knew the next step would not just be gathering facts, it would be confronting the people behind the polished broadcast, forcing their secrets into the open. And when she did, the story would no longer be about a collapsing anchor or a malfunctioning teleprompter. It would be about murder. Chapter 7: The Framed Colleague. The following morning, Jessica Fletcher returned to the studio with a heavier sense of urgency. The network had officially suspended Dana Collins pending investigation, and the young writer's name was already leaking to the press as the prime suspect. Headlines swirled with speculation: sabotage in the studio? Rookie writer at the center of scandal. The network had issued a bland statement about internal reviews, but Jessica knew how quickly gossip could turn into professional ruin. If she didn't act quickly, Dana would become a convenient scapegoat, her career destroyed before it had truly begun. Jessica arranged to meet Dana away from the glare of the studio. They sat at a quiet corner table of a neighborhood diner, its clatter of dishes and hum of conversation providing just enough background noise to keep them unnoticed. Dana looked haggard, her eyes rimmed with red from sleepless nights. She clutched a mug of tea but barely touched it. "They think I poisoned her," Dana whispered hoarsely. "My own colleagues. They look at me like I'm some kind of monster." Jessica reached across the table and laid a steady hand on hers. "Dana, I don't believe for one moment that you're guilty. But I need you to trust me completely. Every detail you can remember, no matter how small, could matter." Dana nodded shakily. "I'll tell you everything." Jessica guided her gently. "Start with the days before Marissa collapsed. Did she say anything unusual to you? Ask you to do anything out of the ordinary?" Dana's eyes flickered. "Yes. Last week, she asked me to pull invoices and contracts from our advertising department. Big accounts, pharmaceuticals, financial services, tech sponsors. She said she'd noticed discrepancies. Payments that didn't line up, strange addendums in the contracts. She thought someone inside the network was cooking the books." Jessica's pen scribbled swiftly across her notebook. "Did she tell you why she wanted the information kept secret?" "She said she couldn't trust anyone else," Dana whispered. "She told me to bring the files only to her. No copies, no emails. Just printouts. I thought maybe she was planning an exposé. But then, her voice broke. Then she collapsed." Jessica's mind spun. Marissa had uncovered something dangerous, financial fraud tied to the network's advertisers. That meant powerful people had motive to silence her. Poisoning her coffee eliminated the immediate threat, while planting the sinister line on the teleprompter diverted suspicion toward Dana. A double-edged plan. "Dana," Jessica said softly, "who else knew you were helping Marissa?" "I didn't tell anyone," Dana insisted. Then her expression faltered. "Although, when I went to Marissa's office with the papers, Alex Monroe was there. He left as I walked in. He smiled and said something about rookies playing detective. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but—" Jessica's pulse quickened. Alex again. He had hovered at every turn, at the teleprompter booth, in the writer's room, now outside Marissa's office. His rivalry with Marissa and his ambition for her chair were undeniable. Dana gripped her mug. "Do you think Alex?" Jessica didn't answer directly. "I think Alex Monroe had both opportunity and motive. But we mustn't leap to conclusions. We need evidence." Later that afternoon, Jessica visited the hospital again. Marissa remained unconscious, her condition unchanged. A bouquet of flowers sat on the windowsill, expensive lilies with a small card tucked inside. Jessica pulled it free. The note was unsigned, but the scrawl of the handwriting was unmistakable. She had seen it in the producer's notebook, jagged, hurried, almost aggressive. "Rest well. The truth must stay buried." Jessica's chest tightened. Whoever had written this wasn't just cold-blooded, they were arrogant enough to taunt their victim in the hospital. And they clearly believed Marissa would not wake to contradict them. She slipped the note into her handbag and returned to the studio. The atmosphere was tense. Alex was rehearsing solo, filling Marissa's empty chair with forced authority. Crew members whispered about contract negotiations already underway to elevate him to lead anchor. The speed of it all chilled Jessica. She approached Owen, the nervous teleprompter operator she had questioned earlier. He looked even paler today, as if carrying a secret that gnawed at him. "Owen," Jessica said gently, I know you're frightened. But you saw something, didn't you? He swallowed hard, then nodded. Right before the show yesterday, Alex came into the booth. He leaned over my shoulder and said he was checking the script flow. He typed something, but I thought it was just spacing. I didn't realize he was inserting that line. Jessica's voice softened. Why didn't you tell the police? Because Alex is powerful, Owen whispered. If I accuse him and I'm wrong, my career is over. If I'm right, and he finds out I talked, his voice trailed off. Jessica placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Owen. It's choosing to do the right thing despite it. Owen looked at her, eyes glistening. Will you stand with me if I tell them? You have my word, Jessica said. By evening, Jessica had gathered enough strands to weave into a coherent picture. Dana was innocent. She had been framed using her own account, her carelessness with passwords exploited. Marissa had been targeted because of what she uncovered about advertiser fraud. The poisoned coffee silenced her, while the teleprompter phrase and planted digital trail neatly pointed suspicion at Dana. And at the center of it all loomed Alex Monroe, ambitious, opportunistic, and increasingly cornered by the evidence. Jessica returned to her hotel, spreading her notes across the desk one final time. She whispered aloud, organizing her deductions as if telling the story to herself. Marissa uncovered corruption. Someone feared she would expose it. That person poisoned her coffee and framed Dana. They planted the phrase as both a distraction and a signature. Only Alex had the motive to silence Marissa and the ambition to seize her seat. And only Alex was seen at every critical point, the teleprompter booth, the writer's room, Marissa's office. The pattern is too precise to be coincidence. She leaned back, closing her notebook. Tomorrow, she would present her findings to Detective Alvarez. The truth was nearly within reach. But Jessica knew killers often grew desperate when cornered. And in a world of cameras, lights, and scripts, the final act was always the most dangerous. Chapter 8, The Final Reveal. The following morning, Jessica Fletcher arrived at the Manhattan precinct, carrying her notebook like a shield of truth. Detective Alvarez greeted her with tired eyes. He had been running interviews all night, but the case remained mired in speculation. Dana Collins was still under suspension, Alex Monroe was still smiling for the cameras, and Marissa Gray remained unconscious in her hospital bed. Mrs. Fletcher, Alvarez said, motioning her into the conference room, I hope you've brought more than suspicions. The press is chewing us alive, and my captain wants someone in cuffs. Jessica set her notebook on the table. Then you're in luck, detective. I believe I can give you the culprit, and the evidence to prove it. Alvarez leaned back, arms folded. Go on. Jessica began calmly, methodically, as though narrating one of her novels. First, we know Marissa was poisoned through her coffee. The residue on the saucer confirmed it. Second, the teleprompter was altered to display the phrase, "The truth is buried in blood." That was not part of the original script. The system logs show the edit was made from Dana Collins's account, but from a workstation in the producer's office, not from her desk. Someone used her credentials to frame her. She flipped open her notes, sliding a copy of Marcus's log report across the table. Third, I found a notebook in that same office. It contained variations of the phrase written on the teleprompter. It also contained a photograph of Marissa with the words, "She knows" scrawled across it. Whoever wrote that feared what Marissa had uncovered. Alvarez studied the evidence, brow furrowing. You're saying Dana was set up? By who? Jessica's eyes sharpened. By Alex Monroe. Before Alvarez could respond, the door opened. As if summoned by fate, Alex himself strode in, summoned for another round of questioning. He looked immaculate, dressed in a dark suit with a tie pin that glittered under the fluorescent lights. His expression was cool, but his eyes betrayed irritation at being treated as anything less than a celebrity. "Detective," Alex said smoothly, "I trust we can get this wrapped up quickly. I have a broadcast to prepare for." Jessica turned to face him. "Perhaps you should cancel those plans, Mr. Monroe. You won't be anchoring the news tonight." Alex blinked, momentarily thrown. "Excuse me?" Jessica's voice remained calm, every word deliberate. "You poisoned Marissa Gray. You framed Dana Collins. And you left a trail of evidence so sloppy it was practically begging to be uncovered." Alex laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. "This is absurd. I was on air when Marissa collapsed. Millions of viewers saw me. Are you seriously suggesting I murdered my co-anchor live on television?" "Yes," Jessica said simply. "Because the murder weapon was not a gun or a knife, but words and a cup of coffee." She paced slowly, every step measured. "You slipped into the teleprompter booth moments before the show, as Owen the operator testified. You typed in the altered line, not to add to the script, but to create chaos and to frame Dana, whose account you had easy access to. You knew she left her password on sticky notes. You had been in the writer's room earlier under the pretense of looking for research." Alex's jaw clenched. "Circumstantial." Jessica nodded. "And yet you also had access to Marissa's coffee. On camera, seconds before she took her final sip, you glanced at her mug. A subtle look, but one captured forever on the broadcast recording. I reviewed it frame by frame. You weren't glancing at her, you were checking to see if she drank." Alvarez looked at Jessica sharply. "You can prove that?" "I can," Jessica replied, pulling a USB stick from her handbag. "The studio archives every broadcast. The footage is there for anyone to see." Alex's composure wavered, but he rallied with a sneer. "Even if that's true, it doesn't prove I poisoned her coffee." Jessica's eyes glittered. "That's why I brought this." She slid the hospital note across the table, the Lily's card from Marissa's bedside. "Rest well. The truth must stay buried. Written in your handwriting, Mr. Monroe." The same hurried scrawl from the producer's notebook. "I compared them myself." Alex's mask cracked. His lips pressed into a thin line, his face blanching. "That's not mine," he muttered. "It is," Jessica countered. "You see, Mr. Monroe, you spent your life in front of cameras, learning to control your expression. But words betray us all. You couldn't resist leaving your signature, your flourish. The same arrogance that led you to poison your colleague in plain sight." The silence in the room grew heavy. Alvarez leaned forward, his pen tapping against the table. "Care to explain, Alex?" Alex's eyes darted from Jessica to the detective, his composure fraying. "She was going to ruin everything," he hissed suddenly. "Do you have any idea how much was at stake? Millions in advertising contracts. Sponsors that keep this network alive. And she wanted to blow it all up because of a few discrepancies in the books." Jessica's voice was quiet, almost pitying. "So you silenced her?" "I did what had to be done," Alex snapped, the mask fully gone now. "Marissa thought she was untouchable. But she underestimated me. I wasn't going to spend my life in her shadow." Detective Alvarez rose slowly from his chair. "That's all I needed to hear." He signaled to the uniformed officers at the door. "Mr. Monroe, you're under arrest for attempted murder." As they stepped forward, Alex tried to rally one last shred of dignity. "This won't stick," he spat. "The network will protect me. I am the face of Morning America today." Jessica's gaze was steady, her voice calm as ever. "Not anymore." The officers led him out, his polished shoes clattering against the linoleum. The door shut behind them, leaving silence in their wake. Alvarez exhaled heavily. "You've done it again, Mrs. Fletcher. I'll admit, I wasn't sure we'd nail him. But you pulled every thread together." Jessica smiled faintly. "Words always tell the story, detective. Even when people think they've buried them." Later that evening, Jessica stood outside the hospital once more. Marissa remained unconscious but stable, her recovery still uncertain. Jessica placed the Lily's card, the killer's message, in the hands of the attending officer, ensuring it would remain secured as evidence. She gazed through the window at Marissa, lying pale but unbroken, and thought of the cost of truth. In a world built on appearances, Marissa had dared to dig deeper, and she had paid dearly for it. But Jessica took comfort in knowing justice had been served. As she walked back into the Manhattan night, the city hummed with its usual indifference. The lights blazed, the streets pulsed, and somewhere in a studio, another broadcast played as though nothing had happened. Jessica knew better. Beneath the gloss and polish, behind the screens and scripts, the truth had clawed its way to the surface. And once again, it had been her privilege, and her burden, to be its messenger.